The most bullish catalyst in Bitcoin history dropped earlier this week. Have a listen.
Tesla announcing today it bought $1.5 billion of the cryptocurrency. Tesla saying it made the purchase for the ability to further diversify and maximize returns on our cash. The news sending Tesla shares higher by more than 1% in Bitcoin to its highest level on record. So tonight we start the show with a simple question: why?
Well, Melissa, I'm here to answer that question of why Elon Musk and Tesla decided to buy $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin, leading to a new Bitcoin all-time high. We had Bitcoin's largest candle ever of $8,000 in a single day. On this episode of the Profit Maximalist Show, I'm going to cover three very important things. The first one is Tesla is not going to be the last company to do this, and I'm going to have Michael Saylor explain why, and he's the guy who convinced Elon to buy in the first place. Secondly, I'm going to be talking about the next major company that's about to buy, and this isn't some conspiracy theory. The signs are there if you're watching closely enough. And lastly, I'm going to cover my favorite research report that came out this week looking at how high Bitcoin could go if a couple more companies do devote some of their corporate treasuries into buying Bitcoin. We're talking price targets, we're talking about what company is next, and we're looking at why Elon did this, why it makes sense, and why he's buying into the trade that all of us are already in. You guys are going to love this episode. If you're into Bitcoin, into trading crypto, this is the show for you. Be sure to subscribe, hit the like down in the video if you guys have been liking these market updates. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get on to the show.
There's only one way out from here, and that's up.
We're going up!
It's $100 million. That's a lot of money.
We're going up!
Which makes it the holy grail of investment.
Yeah, we're going up!
All right, guys, let's dive into this one. The reason I said this is the most bullish news in Bitcoin's history is because I believe it's finally kicked off that domino effect of more corporations doing this with their Bitcoin. And they're not going to be small purchases. They're going to be billion-dollar purchases or $500 million purchases. And we saw what that did to the price on Monday. Obviously, Elon didn't buy on Monday. It was the news being released that they had bought that Bitcoin that caused the $8,000 price candle. I just want to clarify that. They're required based on regulations to disclose that they actually bought it in the past month. So sometime before that, he acquired it. Then the announcement comes and the price pops. But regardless, the impact is clear. So instead of me trying to explain why Tesla did it, I'm going to let Michael Saylor explain it. And he's the guy that convinced Elon Musk to do it and shared his playbook. And it must have been good enough for Elon because he went ahead with a $1.5 billion purchase. This clip explains exactly why Tesla and Elon made that large purchase and why other corporations will follow. This is important. Here it is.
Well, I think in the current macroeconomic environment, most corporations are beginning to realize that their cash is going to be a depreciating asset, and they need to turn their balance sheet into an appreciating asset. The obvious thing to do is to convert dollars that are being inflated at, expanded to 15% a year into a scarce digital asset. And that's what Bitcoin is.
You know that phrase you always hear, store of value, and maybe you bought because of it, but really you bought because you think numbers going to go up and it's a good trade? Well, the large money and corporations are actually starting to believe that narrative, and I also believe it to be true that in the long term, Bitcoin does have the potential and have the characteristics to be a store of value asset. And clearly, just a couple of them can drive up price a ton. And Michael Saylor explained it perfectly. Cash is one of the worst assets you can hold year over year, but it affects so many of us very little. Very few people actually have 10K or 100K in cash saved up. But when you get to the levels of money that some of these businesses have, well, all of a sudden having 10 billion or 5 billion or 20 billion cash on hand really starts to hurt your company 5-10 years out. And so you're left with a couple choices. Let your purchasing power decrease every single year, or allocate some of that cash to the best performing store of value asset in the entire world, and that's Bitcoin. Which poses the next question. Which large company is going to be next? MicroStrategy did it first. You have Tesla following up, and there's been a couple other small companies in there that bought 50 million, 100 million. I'm talking about what next major company buys that gives us that next 10 to 15% price spike. And I got a pretty good tell on who's next. I think it's going to be Twitter, and I'll explain why. So a little over a week ago, I got a random DM from someone, and I get 100 DMs a day, so I don't always check them, but I got a direct message, and they said, I think Elon Musk is about to purchase Bitcoin. Hear me out. It sounded like conspiracy, but I'm going to show you guys that I was able to predict that Tesla was about to buy Bitcoin, and all the signs are pointing to Twitter doing the same thing. This is the DM that I got. Remember, the news came out on February 8th that Tesla had actually bought 1.5 billion, and that's when Bitcoin had that crazy spike. The DM that I got was sent to me on February 2nd. And even though I was skeptical at first, I believed it after reading the thread because I'd been following Elon Musk's Twitter really closely. So I said, read this thread, and after you read it, ask yourself, is it likely that Elon Musk is buying Bitcoin for Tesla just like Michael Saylor did for MicroStrategy? I think the answer is yes. And that was on February 2nd. The news came out on February 8th, so a whole week early. This is what the thread said. The first is a picture showing that Elon Musk asking, are large transactions like that even possible? He was asking Michael Saylor if their $1.3 billion Bitcoin purchase was possible, what the playbook was. And about a week or two later, somewhat mysteriously, Elon Musk tweeted out, in retrospect, it was inevitable. That had a ton of Bitcoiners thinking that it could be on the horizon, but all the stars weren't lined up yet. And in this thread, the guy who gave me the tip went on to post about MicroStrategy's playbook. So this is the playbook that Elon Musk likely read. Right after that, after he tweets, it was inevitable, he puts Bitcoin and only Bitcoin in his bio. That's Elon Musk. And then just a couple days later, he says, I'm going off Twitter for a while. So yeah, there was definitely some doubt in my mind whether or not Elon Musk was actually about to go through with the purchase, but it was enough signs, enough signals that I did think it was getting likely. And that exact same likelihood applies to Twitter and Jack Dorsey. Jack's the CEO, founder of Twitter. He only has Bitcoin in his bio. He has a couple different Bitcoin companies, both the Cash App and Square Crypto, which are focused solely on Bitcoin. But the smoking gun for me was when Twitter CFO just went on CNBC and he was asked the question, have you guys considered buying Bitcoin with your corporate treasury? Here's what he had to say, and I think you guys are going to start to pick up on the hint that I'm watching.
But we watch closely what other companies do to see what we can learn from them. And when we think about our balance sheet, we think about matching how it's invested and the currencies in which it's invested relative to how we might pay people, how we might pay employees should they ask to be paid in Bitcoin, how we might pay a vendor if they ask to be paid in Bitcoin, and whether we need to have Bitcoin on our balance sheet should that happen.
After hearing that from Twitter CFO, I imagine you're starting to think I'm not as crazy as it seemed at first by guessing that Twitter does this next. And remember, if there's a price spike, it's not just the market reacting to that one company buying, it's them realizing that all the other companies are going to follow. And I have a special report coming up, a research report that shows how high price will go if we continue to have these corporations buying some. That's the whole point of this video. How crazy does this trend get? We used to think of institutions buying as hedge funds or pension funds or wealthy investment managers. But now I think the institutions that are even more exciting are all these corporations that have to put Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So here it is in all its glory, what the price of Bitcoin would do if other companies start to follow suit. And remember, I think they will. Based on what Michael Saylor said, based on Elon following suit and giving it such a large allocation, Twitter, I think, is next. And after a while, these companies are not going to be able to ignore it, especially if the money printing continues. Here's what the report said. This is from ARK Investment Management, and they looked at the hypothetical price increase if Bitcoin were to replace cash on S&P 500 corporate balance sheets. Companies making that switch from the worst asset to hold for a long time, cash, into the best performing asset with store value qualities, Bitcoin. So the first conservative estimate they gave is based on all the S&P 500 companies putting 0.1% of their cash. That's a tiny amount. Tesla almost put 10% of their cash in. So just 0.1%, a small allocation based on the chance that Elon and Michael Saylor is right, that would increase somewhere in the range of 10 to 20K. You start looking at companies putting on 1% and it jumps up to 50,000. And that's a price increase per Bitcoin, right? So right now we're sitting at 50K. If 1% of the cash on S&P 500 companies put that cash, 1% of it into Bitcoin, you see a $50,000 increase per coin. That puts us at 100K per coin. Where it gets really interesting is in between that 1 to 10% mark. I imagine there's not going to be a ton of companies that are as aggressive as Tesla and as aggressive as Elon, right? But maybe some are. Most are probably going to fall in the 0.1 or 1% or maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%. But let's just say they did, right? Let's say 10% of the cash on hand of these companies in the S&P 500 do start contributing to Bitcoin if inflation really shows up and this trend picks up and it's a race to get in. Price of Bitcoin per coin jumps $350,000 or $400,000 per coin. You start to see $500,000 Bitcoin if every company did what Elon did. And I'm not necessarily suggesting that's going to happen. I think Elon's an extreme case, but I do think it's plausible and maybe even likely that we start to see a lot more companies get on board with the 1 to 2 to 3%. And that's still a $50,000 to $75,000 price increase per coin. You guys can see why I want to make this video. Hit like down in the video if you guys enjoy these market updates. Some really fun episodes coming up. I have one tomorrow with Marty Bent. He works at Great American Mining, and we're looking at ESG funds, billions of dollars that might flow into Bitcoin based on Bitcoin actually being good for the environment, based on helping oil miners. That's a fascinating one because most people think that Bitcoin mining is bad. Also going to be talking about Ether, breaking new all-time highs. We had the CME launch, one of the biggest news events of the year for ETH. I'm going to break down exactly what it means in a similar video to this one so you guys understand the concept, what even happened, and then also mathematically what it's doing to the price. Was there a run-up? Did the hype get sold into? How has price reacted in this first week of trading? I'm breaking it all down, and then next week I'm having on two traders, two of the biggest traders that I know that had killer years last year. One guy had an 8-figure year, somewhere in the range of 20 to 30 million profit, and the other trader is top 75 all-time on Binance's P&L list. Some killer episodes coming up. Hit the subscribe button down below. Appreciate you guys watching. And before you go, I want to mention that these episodes are sponsored by Bybit. So it's the best place to trade Bitcoin and ETH with leverage. If you want a deposit bonus, use my link right down below. And they're also sponsored by Matcha. If you like trading on Uniswap, you like DeFi plays, it's cheaper to trade on Matcha than it is on Uniswap. Use my link right down below. You guys are going to love that one. And I appreciate you guys watching. I'll see you on the next episode of the Profit Maximalist Show. Peace.